Welcome to the Power of Love show, sponsored by the D.D. Jackson Foundation, where we shine a light on loss and grief and how it impacts our lives. We are here to provide hope, resources, and a community so no one feels alone in their grief. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Power of Love show, sponsored by the D.D. Jackson Foundation, where we shine a light on loss and grief and how it impacts our lives. My name is TJ Jackson, and with me is my eldest brother, Taj Jackson.
Hey, TJ.
What is going on, man?
Nada mucho.
Nada mucho. Well, one thing I can say is that we are live right now on Facebook and YouTube. So if you are watching us, we want to thank you for joining us. We have a wonderful show lined up for you today. But before I go on to the next thing I want to say, I want to also remind everyone that we are also on all the major podcast platforms, whether that's Stitcher, Apple, Spotify, Google, and there's more that I don't even know about. We are there. So if you would like to consume your content via podcast, we want to remind you to check us out. And if you are already listening to us on the podcast and do enjoy the shows, we want to remind you to go ahead and leave a review. It helps. It helps the algorithms, and it helps people find the content that they may be looking for. And as you all know, our whole goal here is just to do our part in helping people through this very difficult process called grief and loss. And anything we can do to be out there to help people, we want to do it. So that is one way how you can help us. Another way you can help us is simply by going to our website, www.ddjf.org. And you can either make a donation or you could tell people about what we do. That is another way to really help us build this foundation and community to the point where we want it to get to. With all of that said, we are not licensed therapists. We are just ordinary people who've experienced loss in our lives. We've been impacted by it, and we like to think that we have learned from it. And we like to share our opinions in an attempt to help you get through whatever it is you are going through. Saying that, if you think you need more, or if you think you need professional help, we urge you to seek it and to find it. Please, please, please do not just rely on us. All right, Taj, that is pretty much our intro. And one other thing we like to do in our intro before we welcome in our special guest is talk about our prior week. So I will leave it up to you to start this part of the show off. Anything exciting happened in your last week or so?
No, I mean, I think it's July now, and Tina's due in July. So every day is a day gearing towards another birth, and a year an expert in that field. But for me, it's just my third time, so it's still, still kind of new in that way. Very excited, but it's also a lot of prep, a lot of just kind of trying to figure out everything. I don't think it's hit me like it should yet in that way. I think maybe the third one kind of you cruise a little too much in that way.
Yeah, it's the same old song, but at the same time, Taj, it's like you're about to get hit. It's multiple kids gets challenging, but it's all part of the description of being a family man and a father. So just make sure you get your time and you get your rest, because you're gonna need it, my friend. You're gonna need it. Go ahead.
I think the coolest thing about being a parent for me in general, and I waited a long time, obviously, is basically just living vicariously through them, like seeing things fresh for the first time.
Yeah.
When Taylor,
especially for you, Taj, because you don't get out your house much.
I don't. But I'm just saying, like, when they get to see anything new, it's like it's wonderment and excitement, and it's like it's kind of exciting to see in that way.
I completely understand. As for me, we went out to Long Beach and we went to the Queen Mary, which was pretty cool. So I know I had been there before as a kid, but to learn some of the facts about the Queen Mary ship, Rio, my youngest son, is absolutely obsessed with the Titanic.
I was going to say, had to be.
Yeah,
I love
so
Reese.
he's the one who put the trip together and came up with the brilliant idea of doing a trip. There's like a little fly or mosquito that's flying around my face. So that's why I keep swiping. But he absolutely loved it. You know, he felt like he was back in time and just, you know, it was just a really cool experience for him and therefore for us. But
Right.
it was a lot of fun and I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I
Oh
would.
wow.
It was really, really cool. But I think that's about it, Taj. I think, like I said, we have a very awesome guest on our show today. So for me, I'd love to just dive in if that's
Let's do
okay
it.
with you.
Yeah.
Cool. On today's episode of the Power of Love Show, we welcome a special guest. His name is Colin Campbell. And Mr. Campbell has many roles in life, including husband, theater artist, filmmaker, author, teacher, friend, brother, and son. But the role he identifies with first and foremost is dad. So when his two teenage children, Ruby and Hart, were tragically killed by a drunk driver in 2019, Colin's life and very identity were shattered, and he was left to navigate his overwhelming grief and life without Ruby and Hart. After their deaths, Colin would often hear the phrase that many fellow grievers have encountered after a loss: there are no words. Although a very common phrase in the grief world, Colin believes that we must give words to our loss, words to articulate our grief, and words to share memories of our lost loved ones. In his own grief journey, Colin has found that voicing his feelings, verbalizing his grief, and having his community bear witness to his loss were the keys to him moving towards acceptance of his new reality. In his book, Finding the Words, Working Through Profound Loss with Hope and Purpose, Colin puts words to the experience of losing his children and outlines concrete actions a person in grief can take to help them in their struggles. At the end of each chapter, Colin offers not only these concrete actions, but also journal prompts that act as a resource rather than a mandatory assignment, and morning rituals to help spark imagination and inspire readers to create rituals to honor their own grief and lost loved ones. Colin is also a writer and director for theater and film. The short film he wrote and directed with his beautiful and talented wife, Ciralio. I may be butchering it, Colin, but Colin will come in and fix it for me. Anyways, Ciralio was nominated for an Academy Award. He teaches screenwriting at Chapman University and theater at California State Polytechnic University in Pomona. He has a BA from the University of Pennsylvania and an MFA from Columbia University. He's currently developing a solo performance piece titled Grief, a one-man shit show. Here today to share more about his journey and his book, which has been described as a profound, honest, pragmatic, and comforting field guide for each of us searching for a way to live with loss. Without further ado, everyone, please welcome Mr. Colin Campbell to the Power of Love show. Colin,
Yes,
Hi.
there
Colin.
you are. Thank you so much for being here today. Colin, first and foremost, first I want to say, correct me on the pronunciation of the film.
Ciralio, you got it. Ciralio.
Okay,
Yeah.
Ciralio. Okay, I practice too. I just want everyone to know I practice. But now it's seeping more in. But anyways, Colin, first we want to express our sincerest condolences for the loss of your beloved babies, your children, Ruby and Hart, who you described in your book as beautiful, charming, witty, talented, brilliant, and loving. And we want to thank you for channeling your grief into creating a tangible resource, which is your book, that can help other grievers navigate their own journey of loss. Truthfully, from the bottom of our hearts, we salute you and thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Now, you detail in your book how in the early days of loss, you devoured books on the topic of grief written by experts and survivors alike. And while each contained kernels of insight about grief, each book ended up disappointing you to a degree because you still wondered how to actually get through your grief. So the question I have for you is, why was it so important for you to write a book that was different than the others that existed in the grief space? And how did you aim to set your book apart?
Yeah, thank you. Those are great questions. And thank you for having me on your show. I'm
Yes.
so honored and excited to be here. Yeah, a couple things I think it motivated me to write the book and add to this the already existing books that are out there. And one was I think a lot of the grief books are written like 10 years later. Like I lost somebody 10 years ago, and here's all this wisdom that I have now, which is great. But part of me in fresh grief was like, wait a minute. I think maybe you've forgotten a little bit just how rough it is in the early
Mm,
days. Let's just talk about the early days. How do we get through the days? And the other thought I had is what you alluded to, the idea of taking action in grief. Like, what are we actually doing when we grieve? I think I had an idea that grieving meant you're just sad. You just feel really sad for a long time, and then somehow you're better. And I've discovered that taking actions in grief, doing specific things, mourning rituals, engaging with community, engaging with our loss, really helped me. And so I wanted to share that. And then finally, I felt like a lot of times I was in grief groups, and a lot of grievers, they would talk about the aching and the loss. And then very quickly, the conversation would shift to how they felt abandoned by their loved ones, how they felt
mm.
so terribly alone in their grief. It was such a common issue. And my wife and I, maybe because we're theater backgrounds, I don't know, we just we found ways of communicating our needs to our community that allowed us to keep them with us, in a very strong way. And I thought I had something to offer people, specifically people who felt alone in their grief,
Yeah.
specific tools they could use so they weren't so alone as they mourned.
Yeah, it's we always talk about that's one of the most challenging aspects for us. We lost our mother at
Mm,
a young age. Is you start to
yeah,
feel alone, and you start to it's a very interesting dynamic. But for us, we were blessed enough to have each other who were going through a similar road, and it sounds like you had your wife, which was a huge component to your
yeah.
where you're at. And um I will want to say this though, Colin. An interesting topic you focus on in your book is how people aren't prepared for the panic and fear of early grief.
Mm,
You explain that people expect sadness and tears, and of course, but not the anxiety and fear of those early days. Post a loss. You mentioned three essential fears: loneliness, madness, and meaninglessness. Can you share a bit more with our viewers your thoughts on this subject in hopes of shedding light on a grief reality not often spoken about?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that I was just stunned at just how scared I was, especially in those early days. It's like I think part of it was if Ruby and Hart can be alive in one moment and then just gone the next, then we all can. There's that sense of like, life is suddenly seems really precarious. And I
Mm,
thought it wasn't. My wife and I had this thing called proof of life, where if we were apart, just visually apart from each other in the house, we needed we need to be like reassured. Like, are you still alive?
mm,
Literally. If we go out to an errand in a store and it takes us 10 minutes longer, each of us start to panic. You're dead too.
Mhm.
But also, I think it's so terrifying to be without the one you love. Ruby and Hart were, as you said, part of my core identity, and then they're gone, and that's just so scary. Who am I? Um, and it's so visceral, that fear, and then the madness, the fear that I'm losing my mind. Um, them, and if I start to grieve, if I start to weep, maybe I'll never stop.
Mhm.
Right? And I'll lose my mind weeping. It felt like that. And it took several weeks of weeping to really be like, oh, it's okay. I'm not
mm,
scared of weeping anymore. I'm not going to lose my mind. But it's terrifying. And then the meaninglessness that you talked about too. I think I think a lot of people with experiencing profound loss, life suddenly loses meaning. Like if I can't
Mm.
share my life with Ruby and Hart anymore, does it matter? You know, why am I on earth anymore? Why am I alive? Literally. Why am I alive without my children? And I think it takes life in order to get that sense of purpose back.
It cut out right there. You said, I think it takes, what did you say at the very end to get the
Oh,
purpose back?
it yeah, that it takes work and engagement in
Mm.
life. Like you really
Okay,
have to
thank you.
actually like consciously do it. Like I want to re-engage in life so that I can find a reason to be alive. If that
I,
makes any sense.
it makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
and it's very relatable for me.
Mm,
I don't want to put words in Taj's mouth, but you know, when we lost our mother, we she was our everything, and she was our manager of our, even from our music group. And you know,
right.
I remember going through an experience when that I didn't really care about anything. Similar things, like you lose the meaning of life, or the care for living life in a sense. And
Hmm.
you know, we were blessed to have a support system, especially being as young as we were, that helped us refine a purpose and to make her proud, or to do something in her honor. And you know, and now even today we're doing that with DDJF,
Yeah.
and you're doing it with your book, and other things. But I just want to commend you, because you know, I can't think of a more challenging loss than losing your children. And I just commend you for having the strength to put pen to paper and to write it out, and to help people get through the situation, because we need more people like you who can do that. It's such an important resource for everyone. Even in our community, there's some parents that have lost their kids, and I've never experienced that, so I can't truly understand what they are going through. But people like you can, and help them. And even if it's one bit that you help them, it can make a huge difference in their lives. So truthfully, Colin, I just want to thank you for, as I like to say, doing your part, because it's not easy for any of us when we deal with this significant loss. So big thank you to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
I
you. I
want to
appreciate
add to
that.
that just real quick, because it takes a special person to share their pain in that way
Mm,
so publicly and put it into a book. But knowing you're doing that to help others, as TJ said, it's very commendable in that. And
wow.
um, yeah, I mean, I always say my mom was my compass, and my everything from good grades to being a good boy was because I wanted to make her proud.
Yeah.
And so, like,
Right.
when she was taken from us, I felt like, what am what am I supposed to do now? Like, who am I trying to impress now? Who am I? Why? All my whole purpose was gone in that way. So I, it's not the same. Obviously, I'm just saying that. Yes,
Yeah.
I commend you because there was no resource there, books and stuff, as
Wow.
so when someone like you puts a resource there that's raw and current in that way, as you said, instead of 10 years later, oh, now I'm okay, it's very, as we've been saying, commendable, and it's very, takes a lot of courage, so thank you.
Oh, thanks,
Yeah.
Tosh. I appreciate that.
So another topic covered in your powerful book is the importance of community while grieving. I'd love
Mm,
to know, or if you could tell our community, what role did your community play in the early days of grief, and what role do they play now?
yeah. Yeah. I think I had a misconception about grief before I experienced it, really. The idea that you just go off in a corner by yourself and you're like sad for a while and then you fix yourself somehow. And I found very early on that I needed to talk about my grief and also Ruby and Hart to other people to like literally understand what had happened, to literally process my new reality. I couldn't just sit at home and just think about things. I had to talk about it to literally find the words. And I like to credit my wife's Jewish tradition. So I'm not Jewish, but my wife is Jewish, and we raised our kids as Jews. They were bar and bat mitzvahed, and we're active members of our temple. And I really found the Jewish traditions of mourning taught me like literally how to mourn. They taught me literally what to do to grieve. And a big component of that was being in a community. So, for example, right after the funeral, you have a week of sitting Shiva, which is every night people come to your house, your community comes to your house and literally sits with you. And every night. And at first I was like, what? What are you talking about? No, no, no. My kids were just killed. I don't want people coming to my house, like hundreds of people coming to, no, that's a terrible idea. Right. But actually I learned, no, I need that, because what happened was the crowd would gather, and then our wise rabbi, Sharon Brous, turned to us and said, would you like to talk? Would you like to say any words to these people? And I discovered, oh, I do. I do want to talk, because I've been sitting in my brain, my mind, right? Losing my mind all day long, trying to understand grief. And then I want to talk to people about it and share that, you know. I think we share all the beautiful things in our life with our community, right? We even, like, we see a great movie, we want to tell our friends about it, right? Like, what made it so funny? Oh, I know why. And you talk about it. It's how you understand and process the good stuff in life, right? And it's the same thing with grief. I think we need to share it.
I think that's we've talked about the power of a community and the importance of community, but with your specifics, I think it drives the point even more so. And thinking back, I mean, my best friend lost his mother a little over a year ago, I believe is the time frame. And you know, it's even though we're in our, you know, we're middle-aged men, it's still nothing you can truly prepare someone for. And I noticed it because it was the first time I, at least as an adult, saw how the Jewish community deals with grief and heals. And I completely got and understood what you were saying. There were so many different community activities around the family and as a group that you do, that it does play a great part. And I've learned that for anyone out there, please make sure you have a community. If you're going through a loss, try not to do it alone, or try not to, because I don't know how it is for all of you, but at least for us, it was more like we were always taught to, or I shouldn't say taught it, but it was always natural for us to be very private and to be very alone with our thoughts and to try to do things on our own, and in some ways to tough it out. And I think that is all the wrong messaging. And the more we can make sure that's known, and I think we're making progress, but the more we can make sure that's known as a community, the better off we all will be. So I thank you for sharing that aspect in your story as well. Were you going to say something, Colin?
I agree. I agree 100%. The whole idea of like toughing it out, I think that's what I thought too, right? You don't talk about this stuff. You deal with it, but by dealing with it, that what that really is you just stuff it down, right? you box it up and don't deal with it. That's how people are handling it. But actually handling it is talking about it to people. That's how you handle. That's how you engage with grief and loss and pain, even though it hurts. Yeah, I agree 100%.
There's some wonderful comments, and I usually say this for the end, but I'm going to just sprinkle them throughout. Sarah says, so profound. Colin, you're teaching others how to interact with grieving people. Much of the additional frustration experienced in grief stems from unsolicited advice or well-meaning ignorant statements. And yeah, as I've said several times, I just thank you, because it's not very common that people who go through what you've went through, Colin, can speak on it and be completely open. Forget just on the internet, but even in their own room, in their own little environment, it's a tough thing. So a big respect and appreciation for you, because you are helping, as Sarah said, not only those who are directly impacted, but for us who may be on the outside on how to interact with people who are grieving. So thank you.
I want to actually say something to Sarah's point. I think a lot of people think that the reason why it's hard to say things to people in grief is you're trying to fix them. You're trying to make them feel better. But that's not actually our job. People who are grieving have to feel bad. They lost someone who's very dear to them. So let them feel bad. Don't try and fix their bad feelings by like saying, positive, uplifting things. That's going to end up being hurtful, telling them, oh, don't worry, you can have another kid, right? You can find a new husband. There's like, they don't want to hear that. They're grieving, you know. So that impulse to like fix people's grief, I think that's also, you know, where people get into trouble, like to Sarah's point.
Aside, Colin, from fear and community, readers can also expect to learn more about your thoughts on topics such as denial, anger, and guilt, just to name a few, of course, talking about in the book. But we hoped you could expand on another focus of your book, which is meaning and purpose. After a significant loss, grievers, as we mentioned earlier, can be susceptible to being overtaken by pain and not be able to see a clear path forward in life without their lost loved ones. How, if you can be as specific or as remembering as you can, how did you come to find your own path forward in life after loss, and what would you tell a griever who can't see in those early days that there is hope after loss, and that joy and grief can and often do coexist?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's sort of the toughest part of it, I think. Reconnecting to meaning and purpose. And the idea of holding grief and joy in the same hands. It's so difficult because I think in early grief, at least I felt like I didn't have the right to feel joy. It felt guilty. I couldn't feel happy about anything because that was like somehow, a betrayal of my grief, right? Betrayal of Ruby and Hart. But then it's like, wait a minute, Ruby and Hart loved me. They wanted the best for me. They wanted me to have a good life, you know? So giving ourselves permission to feel joy alongside grief, that's a big component of it. And the other part for me was I had this thing where I said yes to everything. So I didn't want to, but whenever anybody said anything to me, like, hey, do you want to take a walk? Hey, do you want to go grab a bite to eat? Someone said, do you want to go skeet shooting? I've never been skeet shooting before. I just said yes to all of it. Because, and this is kind of extreme, I'm a kind of extreme guy, I guess, but like, I felt like I was probably going to say no to everything, you know? And also I couldn't commit. If somebody said, hey, do you want to take a walk tomorrow? I'd be like, tomorrow, who knows? I don't know if I want to take a walk in 10 minutes. I can't decide about the future, right? So I felt myself like retreating and, from life. And I was like, no, I can't do that. I want to be out in life. I know that's healthy. And so I just said yes to everything, no matter what it was. And I could always say no at the last minute if I changed my mind, but that was helpful to just sort of be re-engaged in life, even though I didn't feel like it, that helped me reconnect. That idea of like, I trust in hope. Does that make sense? Like, I have no hope right now, but I'm going to trust that hope will come, and I'm going to do my best to set myself up for that. I'll do whatever it is, the activity that people are suggesting. And that helped me find meaning and purpose. And then the idea of service, of being useful. So I read this book by Viktor Frankl. He's a Holocaust survivor and an amazing human being. And he really talks about finding purpose in other people. Like, we find our own purpose in life by thinking about other people, how can we help other people, essentially. And that was helpful to me. That's what got me to write this book. It's like, oh, maybe I'll help somebody. That's going to help me, that helps me, that thought that helps me get out of bed and write.
There was one more point I wanted to make, but first I want to show the art we have. For those who are watching, you can see it. If you are looking at the screen, if you're listening, we're just gonna have to try to read as much of this as you can. But it's Colin's book. It's Finding the Words: Working Through Profound Loss with Hope and Purpose. It is a book written by Colin about his personal experience of dealing with grief and significant loss. It is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, Target, Walmart, and as also available as an ebook on Kindle, which I love. And then what I was going to say is to answer Taj's question, it's an audio book as well. So you can find it on Audible. And as you guys have already heard and can hear by listening to the show, Colin is very just a huge resources for so many of us, those who are dealing with direct loss, but also those who may be wanting to know how you can help someone, whether it's another family member or a friend, get through loss. It's books like Colin that can help you get through this this challenging time. Colin, Taj, is there something you wanted to say before I go to the next question?
Are you narrating, or are you on in the Audible one?
Yes, you'll have the
No, I
pleasure
saw a comment
of
about your
listening
voice.
to me.
That's why I was wondering, because someone commended you on your voice. So
Oh, commended me. Oh, wonderful.
yeah,
that's
so that's
that's
why
so
I was
beautiful.
asking for the people. So yeah,
Oh,
good
that's
for
so
you for
kind.
the Audible/audiobook. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
my
recorded
style
it.
more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jack Love says, I was doing that too, Colin, just being an introvert. My therapist said the same thing too, to try to do things, and you can always cancel if you decide you don't want to go. Adrienne says, this is great advice, Colin, with a big exclamation mark. I almost butchered how to say that for some reason. But Isabel says, I felt that too. I remember exactly the first time I felt a tiny bit happy after my mom passed. And when I realized, I felt horrible and cried.
Yeah.
I guess the first thing I wanted you to either say if you experienced anything like this, Colin, or just if you can give advice, or just talk to Isabel with what she may have went through, in case someone else is going through that situation now.
Yeah. Well, I just got a little heartbreak hearing from Isabel. It's so cruel, right? Like, here she is. She's grieving. She's struggling. She gets just a moment of pleasure, and breaks down and cries about it. It's just so, like, that's a brutal side of grief. And I think we all experience it in one way or another. And I guess advice, I don't know, it's just about giving ourselves permission. That grief. I think grief comes with a lot of pain that we have to go through. We have to experience it. We've lost somebody. That's the flip side of love, right? So that pain is important and healthy, but then there's a whole bunch of other pain that's not really helpful, right? All that guilt, the guilt about feeling joy, it's not really helpful. It's not a key core part of grief that we need. It doesn't necessarily honor our loved ones, but we're still going to feel it. Isabel's still going to feel it, but maybe that thought has helped me, that, like, yeah, I feel guilty right now, but that's not great. I'll try and let those feelings of guilt go. They're not helpful in my journey of grief, to my best ability. Yeah.
Colin, aside from your book, another outlet you channeled your shock, anguish, and rage into is a solo performance piece titled Grief, a One-Man Shit Show. Now, I don't usually swear, so I see some comments on there saying, oh my gosh, he's swearing, but it's I still do love your title. Described as a tragic comic exploration of our culture's inability to talk about grief. Comedic and heartbreaking, profound and profane. This is the feel-bad show of the year. Can you tell us, Colin, how this project came to fruition, and how, if at all, it has helped you on your grief journey?
Yeah. It's helped a lot. It's the first thing that I started writing after the crash. So it was only a few days after the funeral, and I had this need to write, express my feelings, process my grief, find the words. And I started writing as a monologue. And initially I thought it was going to be a stand-up routine, believe it or not. I thought it was going to be the darkest stand-up routine that's ever been done, right? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to tell these dark, dark jokes about the deaths of my children. And it changed, and it morphed, and it became a piece of theater instead. It's not a stand-up, thankfully. But I do use humor to process it all. And so I showed it to my wife, which is like 2 pages long, the first part of it. And she said, I love it. Keep writing it. And I turned into a full-length show. And I think it has a really nice arc. I allow myself, my character, as it were, to say a lot of dark, ugly things about grief and honest feelings that I had. And then my character, me, I have a realization, a turn, where I start to sort of see other people's grief, and I start to realize I'm not alone in the world. I'm not so special, right?
Mm.
There are people all over the world that are grieving terrible losses, and let's not compare loss. How about that? Right?
Mm.
Let's honor everybody's grief. And some people have it a whole lot worse than I do. And so my character has this arc that I think is, hopefully is beautiful and very uplifting. It lands in a very nice place, I think. But in the middle of it, I do say dark and I say ugly things, just brutal, honest feelings. And people have seen my show and they really respond to it. They really felt seen. Like, oh, I had those same dark, terrible thoughts,
Mhm.
mean, bitter, angry thoughts in my grief. And that's helpful, I think. It was helpful for me to just express it, and it was helpful for people to hear it and be like, I think there's like affirmation. There's like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not alone.
Exactly, and I was going to say it comes right back to that feeling of being alone, and of being able to share your experiences with others is such an important component that I think we often overlook. I had the graphic up while you were talking about the show, and I have it up again in case those are listening on podcasts. I want to say the website so you can learn more about Colin's show. Go to grief a one-man shit show.com to learn more about Colin's show. I love what you say too. This is the feel bad show of the year. That's fun. One aspect that I haven't mentioned that I would love to talk to you about is the aspect of forgiveness and the challenge of forgiveness. I'm gonna start first. My brothers and I, our mother was murdered, and the
Yeah.
man who took our mother served a long prison sentence and was recently released. But um, it's one of those things that as a kid, when it first happened, the thought of forgiveness, it wasn't even something on my radar. I was just trying to survive, so to say. And
Right.
as I've gotten older, I've tried as much as possible. We've done shows on forgiveness and the importance of forgiving. And again, I'm not asking or any specific thing. I just would love to hear your perspective and where you're at on that. Your tragedy happened far more recently than mine and my brothers, and it took me decades to get to the point where I can even consider forgiveness. But I would just love to hear anything on the topic of forgiveness, because the one thing I feel like I've learned is that when we forgive, it kind of frees and liberates ourselves to be able to move on and in whatever way we need to. So I would just love to hear
Yeah.
any thoughts you have on that topic for you, Colin.
Yeah. Yeah. First, I do want to say I'm sorry for the loss of your mom.
Mm,
It's such a brutal loss,
yeah,
young children to lose their mother,
yeah.
so I'm so sorry. And then I had a quick question for you. Did the person who killed your mom earn your forgiveness in any way?
That's the challenging thing, Colin. The answer to that is no.
No, very little remorse.
Very little remorse.
Or accountability, I should say.
Victimization, to be honest, and
Right.
that's been the challenging part, and that's why I've had quote unquote these false starts in terms of the forgiveness road. If there was a lot more sympathy or
Remorse.
apology, remorse, I think I would be 100% there. I really do, but it's so hard because you would think he's the one who came out the wrong end of the deal, the way, so that answer is a no.
That's interesting. Yeah. I went, my wife and I both went to a men's prison just a month ago, to a DUI group. So these are men serving very long prison sentences. They were in a maximum, level 4, and they're now in level 3. And some of them specifically killed people while drunk, and others committed crimes while drunk and were driving while drunk, but didn't didn't actually kill somebody, with their vehicle, but they were interested and they were engaged. And so we went and talked to these group of men. There were about 25 of them. And they were working. They were working on themselves. They formed this group in prison, specifically to engage with their crimes and the fact that they had chosen to drive drunk, and some of them to kill people while drunk, and with their vehicle, and listening to these men talk about their loss, their grief, and then their also remorse, and their wanting to own up to their crimes, was very powerful. And there one guy, he's dedicating his life to combating DUI. He's very committed, and he's got a plan. He wants to change California, how they teach drivers, so that you learn about DUIs in your process of getting your license. So with real concrete plans, and that's very moving to me. The woman who killed my kids, I don't know if she has any remorse. I don't know. I have no indication either way. So in the absence of that, like a total void, I have no idea where she's at. I knew the night of the crash, she was not remorseful at all. She was also drunk and high, but she was very belligerent, and did not inquire at all about who she had hit. So that's all I have to go on. And I hear what you're saying about forgiveness. It seems like it would be a beautiful thing. And Ruby and Hart were very forgiving people. They were very loving and beautiful. But I don't, right now, from my perspective, I'm not engaging in that too much, because I have no information about where she is at.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's nothing. She's not asking me to forgive her.
Yeah.
She's not earning any forgiveness.
Yeah.
And maybe, it would be helpful to me, spiritually, to just be free of the anger, but that's not where I am.
Yeah.
I'm not okay that my kids were murdered. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Colin, completely understand. And like I said, it's not something that was even on my radar for the first 10, 12, 15 years. I'm still figuring out me. I'm still putting my internal pieces together and doing what I can the way I know how to contribute and to make my mom proud, so I completely understand that answer 100%. One thing, Taj, you good?
I'm just listening. Good.
Okay. I feel like I had a sense that you wanted to jump in. But one thing I also want to say is you're doing a lot, Colin. And one thing I can't, before we end, I can't not mention is that you launched your own foundation. It's called the Ruby and Hart Foundation, which is dedicated to giving underserved schools free books and author visits. And my question to you was, why was launching this foundation important to you, and how can we at DDJF support your mission?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it just happened. Every holiday, every anniversary, the kids' birthdays, the day of their deaths, even Valentine's Day, Christmas, these are all brutal, right? These are all tough holidays to get through, days to get through. And my wife and I try and find something to do on each one to commemorate Ruby and Hart, or to be in life and to not be, victims of our grief in that sense, but to be engaged. And so this time, the anniversary of their deaths, the 4th anniversary, we started this foundation, and it's the Ruby and Hart Foundation. And it's about, as you said, getting books into kids' hands who don't have access to books. And books were huge in our lives. Ruby and Hart loved books. We loved reading to them as kids. Ruby was a voracious reader. She literally read twice as fast as me. So if we were reading a book together, she would just be twice as fast. Slow down, Ruby, slow down. As a little kid, stop it, Ruby. I'm not reading that fast.
That's amazing.
And so she would just, like, we'd see, like, the movie It. We loved horror movies, Ruby and I. We'd go out and see horror movies together. and then she'd go home and read the book, and it is like a thick
Oh,
book, you know.
yeah.
Uh,
No joke.
we saw this amazing movie called Let the Right One In, and then she went out and found the book. It's like this Swedish book. I don't know. She found it in translation and read the whole thing. Like, it was amazing. And I loved reading to Hart and Ruby, and so reading and books are just so key, I think, to so much imagination, you know, expanding the mind. And then there are lots of kids out there who don't have access to books.
Yeah.
And don't get authors to come. You know, authors, they get fancy schools, like give fancy authors stipends to come and read to their kids. And like kids at schools that don't have money, Title I schools they can't afford to pay authors to come in. So there's organizations out there that do that. And we found one, WAAC. And I'm going to space on what that stands for. Whack though, but like Writers Across America, I don't know, but it's a beautiful organization. And my wife is part of it because she has written a book as well, a kid's book, an amazing kid's book called The Big Dreams of Small Creatures. It's hilarious and wonderful. And it honors Ruby and Hart as well. There are characters in there that are modeled after Ruby and Hart. So it's beautiful.
Great.
And so she's had that experience of going into schools and reading to kids, and the kids are like, what? I get my own book? Amazing. And we have these book plates that you can write your name. This book belongs to, and the kid gets to write their name. And it's from Ruby and Hart. So
do you guys have any social media presence for the Ruby and Hart Foundation?
Yeah, it's on Instagram.
Okay.
Ruby and Hart Foundation.
Okay.
And then on our websites, so my website, colincampbellauthor.com, there's a link to the foundation as well.
Great. I guess that was going to be also my next question is how can people learn more about anything that's in your sphere, Colin?
Yeah. So follow me on Instagram is great. But then you can just literally Google the Ruby and Hart Foundation and it will pop up.
Okay.
And it's great. It's through the California charitable. Now I'm so bad with names.
Yeah, me too.
But there's an organization out there. It's a state-run thing that takes care of all the infrastructure. So all the money goes directly to this organization. We don't have a board of directors. We don't have it all goes to the kids and buying books, which is great.
Fantastic. Well, Colin, it's about that time. I want to thank you on behalf of my brother Taj and our entire foundation from the community for being here today, for sharing your story, for helping us, for educating us, for just being there. And I kind of prepared you before. I'm trying to retire the word warn. Prepare is the word I should be saying. Taj is on me for that. But we like to give our guests, sometime towards the end of the show, like now, to talk about anything you want to talk about. It could be on topic. It could be off topic. It could be your favorite television show right now, your favorite song, a childhood memory, what you want to do in 2 years, your favorite vacation spot. It could be about anything you want. So we just like to give our guests that opportunity to share and have our community take something home with them. So with that said, Colin, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you. I want to go off of love. It's in your title too, right? The power of love, right? I went on a podcast and they said if you had a T-shirt that had like a motto, a slogan, what would it be? And right on the spot, I was like, choose love. It just came to me, choose love. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately, that it's scary to choose love. It's scary because you can lose, right? The person you love can be killed, or they can also fall out of love with you. And anytime we open our hearts, it is a risk. It's a gamble. And I think losing Ruby and Hart taught me that it's always worth it, and so my wife and I, we are fostering to adopt two kids, two siblings, a 13-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl, and they've been living with us for 6 months now, and I think about that a lot. Like, choose love. You don't know how it'll go, and you're probably opening yourself up for some heartbreak.
Yeah.
But we're here on earth for a short time, and if we can choose love, I think that's the way to go.
Well said, Colin. I got to say, Taj, how many shows? Almost 300? Are we at 300?
We might be at 300, but we're very close.
And this was in the top 1% for me, and especially with that ending, I think it's a very strong. I love how you said it could be kind of scary because we don't know if that love will be reciprocated for, if it's possible to be reciprocated or not. And that's a very powerful thing that I think hinders a lot of us from trying to choose love. But you're 100% right. We have to choose love, and I thank you for saying that. I'm going to highlight some comments that I want to share.
Oh, yeah.
One is from Jack Love, who says, yes, Colin has a golden velvet voice. So remember, you guys, the Audible for Colin's book. You can hear more of that golden velvet voice there.
Nice.
Adrian says, quote of the day, let's honor everyone's grief. So thank you for that nugget too, Colin. Carol says, I want to forgive, but I struggle with that. It is a very challenging thing, Carol. Like I said, it's taken me over. I'm still in the process. So it's one of those things that's very challenging. Sarah says, I'm very grateful for the show. Thanks for watching, Sarah. And another Sarah, and Sarah says, Colin, your vulnerability and tender insight into your own grief experience is profound. The way you've given yourself permission to feel and continue the legacy of your children is deeply moving. Yeah. Carol also wants to say you have a great heart, Colin. Yeah. Adrian says your children sound like they were and still are amazing. Caregiving Family Legacy with Dr. Lana says this has been such a heartwarming show today. Thank you, Mr. Campbell, for sharing and providing a place of hope. And Dee's Tiny Kitchen says, Colin, you are very brave and thank you for sharing. There are more comments, but we will be here for quite a bit longer. So the one thing I do want to showcase is the super sticker from Bommy. Thank you so much, Bommy. And then I wanted to end with this, which is from Caitlin, who says, Colin, a previous guest, Dr. Julie Shaw, taught us a great question to ask when speaking to grievers that brings both sides a smile. What is something you will want us to know about your lost loved ones? So I'd love to end the show with you, allowing you to share with us something you want us to know about Ruby and Hart. And you've already done about Ruby being such an incredible reader. But if there's anything else you want to share, now is a wonderful time for us.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I did see that interview with Dr. Julie Shaw. That was awesome. I love that.
Oh, cool.
So Hart was a clown. You know, he was like, he would just become characters like all the time, like at the dinner table, like too much. Like, Hart, stop entertaining us. But he would just generate these wild and wacky characters, and they all had names, and his friends knew them. So they'd say like, do so and so, and he would just like become these different characters. And so he was the life of the party, of every party. Yeah, and so sweet. And everybody loved him, boys and girls. They all wanted to date Hart. It was basically like, he's like, what? And Ruby was this super badass. I call her like this lesbian warrior for social justice. Like, she was just out and proud and not scared to engage with people. There's this amazing moment where she was in, some guy was like complaining about pronouns. Like, why do I gotta do different pronouns? And this is a college age guy, and she's only in high school. And she goes up to him and she says, oh, I agree with what she said. He's like, hey, no, I think she's making a really good point. And he got really angry. Stop it. And she's like, well, if you don't like being misgendered, maybe that's how they feel. And it was like this brilliant, like beautiful way to handle it, right? It was just like positive and sweet, and she was just like, and taught him a lesson. I hope.
Well, so, Colin, again, just from all of us, we just want to thank you for being here and sharing your story and enlightening us with all you're doing. And we wish you nothing but the best. We want to make sure you know that our community is your community as well. Anything you got going on or wanted to to scream out to people, please remember us. We are here for you.
Yeah.
And we just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being here and sending you all that love. And to everyone out there who's watching, remember what Colin said, make sure to choose love. I love that ending. Anything else either Taj or Colin you guys want to share before we sign off?
I wanted to thank you guys. This is a beautiful podcast. I love this. This was awesome.
Cool.
Thank you.
More than
Thank you for this
welcome.
opportunity.
Taj Jackson, anything?
No, I mean, I love the idea of a foundation for, in the honor of your 2 kids. I think that's amazing. Wish you the best of luck with that. And I love the idea that it's bringing books to people that wouldn't be able to get books in that way. So, I mean, I love this show. This was a great show in terms of that, removing myself from it in that way. I just, anytime that you can, it helps people. I really appreciate that. But I did have one question real quick in terms of what, I have 2 questions actually. What's your favorite horror movie? Because you brought up horror movie.
Yeah.
And then also, have you been able to watch horror since in that way?
That's a great question. Yes. At first I couldn't. Shortly after the crash, I couldn't see anybody suffering. I couldn't stand to watch it. But then slowly I got back into it. In honor of Ruby, I watched more horror films. Yeah. It did take a while though. And then my favorite, it might be Let the Right One In. I have a lot. Get Out is amazing. I'm always a sucker for and I don't know why I space on the title every time. Stanley Kubrick. It's a Stephen King novel. He's stuck. The Shining. Yes, thank you. I don't know why I keep forgetting. But Ruby also loved The Shining, and at first she was terrified of ever staying in a hotel after that. No matter, this has to be any hotel. But she read the book, of course. She read the book. So yeah, The Shining is a wonderful classic.
Wonderful. Love that.
Very cool.
Because it reminded me, I mean, my mom loved horror too, and we actually watched Halloween all of them together. Yeah. So when the new ones came out, it was that thing of like, I didn't have her to watch them with, but I did it in honor of her. So that's kind of what you're saying. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Taj, was there something else or was that it?
No, that's it. I just was very curious about.
I love that. I love that. All right, we are going to sign off. I told Colin it would be about 35, 45 minutes, and we're almost at an hour. So I apologize, Colin. And to all of you who joined us today, or maybe watching on a rewatch or listening on the podcast, we want to thank you guys for chiming in and listening to us. With that said, please be safe, everyone. We want to send you all the love possible. Remember to choose love, and we will see you guys next week, Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Adios, everyone. Bye.